Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the business of sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a startup to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with my colleagues Damian Sassower and Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo. We'll hear from Scarlet Fu later in the program. Coming up on the show, we take a look back at some of our favorite conversations from 2024 and look ahead at some of the storylines that will matter most in the new year. We hear a conversation with acclaimed sports journalist and author John Feinstein. We spoke with him about his latest work, The Ancient Eight, college football's Ivy League and the game they play.
The one thing I know for sure is the Ivy League's not realigning. They will not. The Ancient Eight will never be the Ancient 10 or the Ancient 6 or whatever. It will always be the Ancient Eight. The same 8 schools that formed the league in 1954 are the same 8 schools that are in the league today.
And with private equity's involvement in sports continuing to grow, we'll look back at a conversation with Velocity Capital Management founding partner David Abrams. All that and more is straight ahead on a special edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But we start in Boston, and a friend of the show, Wyc Grousbeck, and his wife, Emilia Fazzalari. Scarlet, Damian, and I spoke with them about their venture in the spirits industry with Cincoro Tequila and about the future of the Celtics. Let's listen in.
So it all started, it was one summer night in 2016 when my now partners and I decided to get together for dinner. And my partners are my husband, Wyc Grousbeck, Michael Jordan, who owned the Charlotte Hornets at the time, Jeannie Buss, owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, Wes Edens, owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. And so here we were representing 4 NBA teams, got together for dinner, and something pretty magical happened that night. We bonded as friends, and it was all over tequila. And we started talking about how much we all love tequila, and we had this shared love for it. And we started to talk about what we wanted in a tequila. We wanted something that was really delicious, and it's not a word you use to describe tequila normally. And we started talking about how great it would be if there was a tequila that was super smooth and had a long, beautiful finish like a fine cognac or a bourbon. And after that night, we decided to get together for dinner again. It was all around NBA Board of Governor meetings that were taking place in New York. And so after several more dinners and lots more tequila drinking, we decided to create our own and that it was going to be delicious. And we weren't going to stop until we created this incredible liquid. And so that's really how it started. And it took us 3 years. That was, like I said, the summer of 2016. We launched the company in 2019. And it was because our focus was creating this delicious liquid. And we made 1,000 tequilas in that time frame.
Wow.
And then we launched. We had it. We nailed it.
That's a pretty incredible story, and just topped by the fact that it's competitors getting together to do this together. Can you talk a little bit about how you plan to leverage, or what your original plan was to leverage athletes and marketing this brand? Because athletes or celebrities and spirits is something that, there's a lot of competition in the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question, Scarlett. And for us, it was not about leveraging celebrity, but what's interesting is the athlete mindset. And so, athletes work very hard and always strive for greatness. And that is really at the ethos of this brand. It was our approach. It was the sort of athlete mindset, if you will, in the way we approached creating the liquid, creating the company. And so you may hear about Cincoro because of the incredible team that's involved. Michael Jordan, we've got Derek Jeter, Serena Williams, and Michael Strahan, many people involved in, part of the team now. We've expanded it from the 5 of us. And you may hear about the brand because of a celebrity that's part of the team, but you're going to buy your first bottle, your second bottle, and hopefully cases thereafter because of the liquid and this gorgeous bottle.
Wyc, you've been awfully quiet over there. And, I'm sitting here and I'm watching guys like Peyton Pritchard throwing in 28 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. I mean, this guy's a 6-man candidate of the year. I'm seeing Tatum. He's shooting 50% from 3-point range. You guys are passing out championship rings at home in front of the Knicks. Talk to us about your defense of the championship. What comes next for the Celtics? It's such an exciting time for you and the team.
Don't worry, Wyc. He's snarky right now.
Thanks a lot, Damian. Well, if the video we're working on this podcast, you'd be able to see the ring right here. But I will say we were very worried about the Knicks, respectful of the Knicks. They are coming for us, for sure. They're coming for the league. They have rebuilt or added to their team, which was very strong last year. And I mean this very sincerely. And we knew they were sitting in that locker room, that cramped, unpleasant sort of visiting locker room, like every NBA visiting locker room. And they were cooped up in there while we were having this big banner and ring celebration. And then they came out. They came out hard. So we got them that night, but there's 3 more games to go and then maybe the playoffs. Tom Thibodeau, by the way, the head coach, was our assistant head coach in 2008. Yeah. We won a ring together. Tibbs and I are neighbors out in the suburbs and have dinner together occasionally. We're friendly rivals, just like Cincoro. So it all works out in the end.
See, now, I don't want anybody calling this show with this. It's like, you didn't ask them anything about the Boston Celtics and the sale because they can't talk about the sale right now. That's
It's ongoing. The talks are ongoing.
They don't. Yeah, you don't discuss business at the dinner table. Now, back to tequila.
I'm giving you just the brief update on what's going on out of respect to Bloomberg and out of respect to you guys. So if you'd like, I can give you, a short paragraph about how it's going.
Yeah.
Just want to be helpful if I can. So the process is ongoing, and we have hired a couple of great banking firms. Mary Erdos is the lead over at JP Morgan for us, and Greg Lemkow over at BDT, 2 terrific, well-known people. They're very enthusiastic about helping the Celtics find their next home. It's been 22 years for me. I'm going to end up transitioning out after 25 years is the plan. And so we're meeting people right now, beginning the process, put a book together in a data room and meeting buyers. And there's been a lot of interest actually from lots of great people. So we're just getting started, but the process is underway.
And I'm not going to lie, that Cincoro Tequila was good. That's a portion of our conversation with Boston Celtics lead owner Wyc Grousbeck and his wife and business partner Emilia Fazzalari. Sticking with basketball, we go from today's reigning champions to one of the game's legends and Dr. J. Julius Erving. He and National Thoroughbred League co-founder Randall Lane sat down with Scarlet Fu and our Bloomberg television colleague Romaine Bostick about his investment in horse racing. Let's take a listen to a portion of that conversation.
Dr. J, I got to start with you because you're a legend in the NBA, of course, Philadelphia 76er, the king of slam dunks. How did you first get involved in horse racing and specifically the National Thoroughbred League?
Well, I've been out of basketball for a long time, and I've explored other activities, golf being one of them, and it's probably my main post-basketball activity. But I have a history of going to the Kentucky Derby on the invite of Junior Bridgman for about a dozen times, and they've even let me start the race. So that's kind of a big deal. I grew up in Long Island. There's Belmont Park near there, and there are plenty of racetracks in and around New York. So I always heard about racing. And I actually came from a community called Roosevelt, and there's a Roosevelt Raceway right there in Long Island as well. So this was probably my destiny. And when I had a nice conversation with Randall a couple of months ago, my son and I and a friend of his, all decided that we wanted in.
Got it. Well, it sounds like you said, that this was destined to happen at some point. Randall, I want to bring you into the conversation because NTL brings team competition to one of America's oldest sports, and the intention is to make horse racing more like track meets. What are the benefits of a team format? Because Dr. J mentioned golf. I know golf is doing something similar with the TGL, using a team format rather than individual players.
Sure. Well, it's really taking what's one of America's great, not just one of America's great sports, but one of America's great cultural institutions, and taking what works in modern sports, which is, right now you go to a track, you don't even know, unless you're betting on the horse, you don't even know the name of the horse you're betting on. And what we want to do is take what's working in every other sport and creating tremendous wealth in every other sport, and bring that to thoroughbred racing, which is a great, amazing sport, but it needs teams to root for. It needs stars, and then we need more events. I think our parallel is Formula One, which is a circuit that's going around with teams racing against each other, and you root for the drivers, and you root for the teams, and you know who you're rooting for. But it has that similar spectacle. 150,000 people go to the Kentucky Derby. There are just not enough of those right now, and so what we're bringing is that kind of mini Kentucky Derbies with teams that you root for, teams that you know, and stars that come back and race time after time instead of going out to stud.
Are there any parallels to kind of what we saw back in the old basketball days? Obviously we all remember you from the Sixers, but there are people of a certain generation that remember you from the ABA. And the ABA did things for basketball that have now basically become the de facto standard. It was a more exciting league, at least for those of us who are old enough to remember it. And I am curious about how sports leagues position themselves in staying true to, I guess, the traditions of that sport, but at the same time doing more creative things, Doc, to drive people into the stands or into TV viewership.
Well, you have a lot of people on the ownership side and the employees of the owners who, at the end of each season, they sit down and they do an evaluation. What are we going to change? Because sports is in a constant state of change, and some people like the changes, some people don't like the changes, but there's going to be change, and it's better if you have a say-so. So, I think fans should have always been verbal and vocal in terms of, the social media presence. They got an opinion about different players, and sometimes players fire back. So it's moving forward, and this NTL is just a step in moving horse racing forward, and not just in the U.S., but globally.
That's NBA legend Julius Erving, Dr. J, along with National Thoroughbred League co-founder Randall Lane, speaking with Scarlet Fu and Romaine Bostic. Up next on this special edition of the show, we talk college football and the Ancient Eight with acclaimed sports journalist John Feinstein. For my colleagues Scarlet Fu, Damian Sassower, and Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr. It is a special edition of the show as we tie 2024 up in a bow and look ahead to some of the big sports headlines for the new year. Still ahead, we'll check in on the world of private equity in sports with Velocity Capital's founding partner, David Abrams. But first, 2024 saw soccer continue to grow in the U.S. Not too long ago, Bloomberg Originals chief correspondent Jason Kelly, Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo, and Damian Sassower spoke with U.S. Soccer President Cindy Parlow Cone about soccer's growth, its future, and a big investment from NWSL team owner Michele Kang into the national team. Let's take a listen to some of that conversation.
Michele is continuously breaking down barriers and setting new expectations. And I think her gift does exactly this. My 99 World Cup teammates and I, we all thought the 99 World Cup happened and then it was going to be this massive explosion. But it ended up being a moment. right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Michele and what she has done is she started a movement, right? And it has been sustained. You know, her donation to us is going to be so impactful. So she's contributing to 3 main areas. One is enabling us to increase our number of youth national team camps. So we have 8 youth national teams. So we'll have more camps with us. So more opportunities for young girls and women. She's also putting money into expanding and improving our talent identification. So regardless of where you live and play, you will have the opportunity to be seen by our scouts. And then third, and I think this is really important, is she's putting money towards fueling the professional development of the coaches, the referees, and executives. We all know to develop the best players in the world, you have to develop everyone around them too. For instance, right now we're looking with this donation to double the number of female coaches and referees, which would be significant.
That's my colleagues Jason Kelly, Vanessa Perdomo, and Damian Sassower speaking with U.S. Soccer President Cindy Parlow Cone. Now we turn to another space in the sports world that we saw grow a lot in 2024, private equity. Jason, Damian, and I spoke with Velocity Capital Management founding partner David Abrams and Texas Permanent School Fund CEO and CIO Bob Borden. We spoke just after it was announced that Texas would be investing $200 million into Velocity's flagship Opportunity Fund. Let's take a listen to that conversation.
David, tell us a little bit about what's going on with X Games, some of the portfolio holdings, how the fund is structured, and what lies ahead.
Well, I think Elevate is a perfect example of this partnership and why we're so excited. There was some news out the other day about both Velocity and Texas Permanent School Fund and Levy putting significant capital on the balance sheet. But I think one of the big differentiators of this partnership is how Texas Permanent School Fund is not just a typical asset allocator. And the reason I'll bring that up is we have the ability to provide holistic solutions to various intellectual property rights holders. And if I think about Elevate, one of the big initiatives for us as a company is what the disruption is going to lead to in college athletics. And so there's lots of different ways to figure out how to work with the university, whether it's the NIL space, whether it's helping build the stadium, whether it's helping monetize their ticketing inventory. Elevate can do a lot of different things, but Texas Permanent School Fund can provide capital that's private equity oriented, credit, real estate. The name permanent is there for a reason because it's permanent capital where you can hold an asset for 30 years. There's very few examples of other investment firms who have access to that capital, and that allows us to solve problems for rights holders.
Well, it was mentioned earlier what our peers do. We're the largest educational endowment in the country, and actually knocking on $60 billion today. The lessons that I learned over the years when you've got good partners in investment firms, and I think that where my peers have left a lot of meat on the bone is putting everything in boxes, hiring talented firms to manage one, very narrowly defined aspect of the fund and, kind of report back on that. And I found that, there's incredible talent at some of these firms and they're doing a lot of interesting things, not just the little slice that you may have hired them for. And necessity being the mother of invention, in the mid 2000s, I was tapped to run the South Carolina Investment Commission. It was $35 billion, and I was hired and given an attorney and an admin and said, build a cutting-edge endowment-style pension solution. And I realized that we were going to have to really leverage partners a lot more than have traditionally been done. And by providing more free-form capital that can be put to use in not only in funds, but in co-investments, direct investments, both in debt and equity and real assets, seeding platforms, et cetera, a much more fungible form of capital that makes you a true partner with that that group is a key to success. It's the way to access a lot of opportunities, and using those lessons along with the experience that I had with David. I see this space as ripe for development. Consolidation is almost a late stage word. This is still very nascent in some of the technologies and other services in and around entertainment. Just not only the hospitality, but the branding and naming rights and a lot of these things. And those who figure it out and can do it at reasonable scale, will come out ahead.
So, David, can you give us some more of an idea of what specific opportunities look like as we head into 2025? I think about the college space because Velocity focuses on middle market companies. So we're not talking NFL teams, right? That's no longer middle market.
Correct.
But if you're talking about businesses or opportunities within college athletics, obviously that space is growing by leaps and bounds. You have Bill Belichick, who led the Patriots to multiple Super Bowl victories, now joining the University of North Carolina's football team. College athletics is becoming more and more professionalized. It's no longer going to just be middle market anymore.
Well, I think the Belichick announcement is interesting, but it's a lot more than just hiring a football coach to build the football program. UNC is...
What do you see then, starting with Bill Belichick joining UNC, and what kind of opportunities does that open your eyes up to?
College athletics, you can use the word professional sports, but they're entertainment and media businesses. It just so happens that the talent is also going to get a college education at the same time. Bill Belichick is a way for North Carolina to build a global brand, which will attract athletes, which drives the revenue generation of the intellectual property rights of University of North Carolina. So when people want to come to North Carolina now, I get access to one of the most successful NFL coaches of all time, his network of contacts around the world. So if I'm coming to play, they have a fantastic women's soccer team. I'm going to get access to Bill Belichick. Maybe he can help me build my brand. And that is where college sports is going. You just saw the example of what happened at University of Michigan, where all the resources was Tom Brady and Dave Portnoy were put into attracting talent for the university. It's the same exact reason why this happened at North Carolina, because it's a way for them to present an opportunity to talent that other universities can't match.
That's Damian, Jason, and me speaking with Velocity Capital Management founding partner David Abrams and Texas Permanent School Fund CEO and CIO Bob Borden. You're listening to a special edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports as we go through some of our favorite conversations in 2024 and look ahead at some of the stories that will matter in the new year. And now we turn to college football and the Ancient Eight. We spoke with John Feinstein. He has written nearly 50 books, and his latest, The Ancient Eight, College Football's Ivy League and the Game They Play Today, was the subject of our conversation. Let's take a listen to that conversation with Jason, Damian, and Vanessa.
So talk to us a little bit about the book, The Ivy League. Talk to us a little bit about, what non-scholarship offering schools are going to do in a world of NIL here.
Well, for the moment, the Ivy League has been largely unaffected because they never wanted to be part of NILs. They never wanted to be part of the transfer portal. You do get an occasional transfer. You do get an occasional player with some NIL money, but that's the exception, not the rule. In fact, last season when I was researching the book, Princeton had their first transfer since Jason Garrett in 1988. That's how rare transfers are generally across the Ivy League.
And what was it about the Ancient Eight and this, this Ivy League system that you wanted to write a book about? When I was skimming through your book, I one of the things that struck me was how you said the Ancient Eight is something that will never change. And because when you look at the Big Ten and the way it's expanded and the way the Big 12 is retracted and all these things, those schools and conferences are so fluid, but this will always stay the same. So what was the inspiration behind this book?
Well, that was exactly it, Vanessa, to be honest with you. I grew up going to Ivy League football games in New York City at Columbia. They were terrible, but I enjoyed riding the subway up to the tip of Manhattan and walking 3 blocks to Baker Field. So I always follow the Ivy League. And as you mentioned, realignment in college football, which seems to happen every 15 minutes. The one thing I know for sure is the Ivy League's not realigning. They will not. The Ancient Eight will never be the Ancient 10 or the Ancient 6 or what. It will always be the Ancient Eight. The same 8 schools that formed the league in 1954 are the same 8 schools that are in the league today. They have rules that are different from the power schools. They only play 10 games. They play 10 weeks in a row. There are no bye weeks. The champions are not allowed to participate in postseason, which I disagree with. Every other Ivy League sport sends its champion to postseason. Princeton just 2 years ago was in the Sweet 16 in basketball. So that's one thing I do disagree with. But for the rest of it, it's like a throwback to the old days when you played in the same league, you had the same rivals, and you didn't play as many as 16 or 17 games as teams in the championship game will play this year with the 12-team playoff.
That was Jason, Damian, and Vanessa speaking with acclaimed sports journalist John Feinstein. Up next, we look ahead to some of the big stories that we'll be tracking in 2025. I'm Michael Barr. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with my colleagues Damian Sassower and Bloomberg Originals sports correspondent Vanessa Perdomo. It is a special edition of the show where we wrap up some of the big stories from 2024 and look ahead at some of the storylines that might matter most heading into the new year. For a look ahead to what could be in store for 2025, we bring in friend of the show, Bloomberg News global business reporter Ira Budway. So I'm going to start, first of all, I guess one of the big things that I see is that the NBA, they kind of answered pre-holiday worries with LeBron and Curry with the ratings and the splash, Ira.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in the fall of hand-wringing about the decline in their ratings. On ESPN, they were down by like a quarter year over year, down a little bit on TNT. And there was a lot of talk, is it too many three-point shots? Are the big stars getting old? And the Christmas Day games on ESPN did great and brought them mostly back to level. I think there are still some long-term issues. They really do not have, I think, heirs to Curry and obvious ones to Curry and LeBron when they retire. And then you just got the attrition of cable TV, right? There's just fewer households carrying ESPN, but they are dealing with that in their new bucket of deals that starts this coming year.
Well, Ira, let's put some numbers around it, right? LeBron versus Steph Curry peaked at 8.32 million viewers at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, according to the league, and that makes it, if I'm not mistaken, the most viewed regular season NBA game in 5 years. So, I mean, what are we looking for? Are we looking for pre-COVID comparisons here? Are we ever going to get back to that level? Or, how do you kind of evaluate the performance during this holiday season?
It's tricky. That's a very good result for them, given that over those 5 years, the distribution's gone down pretty dramatically, right? So you're getting a bigger slice of a smaller pie. So I think that's good news for the league, that it's not a crisis, it's not an emergency. But, you look at the way they structured their deal starting in the fall, they brought in Amazon. Right, that's a move into the streaming future. They did a deal with NBC that means about half of the games that NBC is going to get, about 100 games, at least 50 of those have to go on NBC broadcast, meaning the channel you can get for free over the air, and that's a move to deal with the fact that there's not as many households getting cable. So they know that, and they're working on it in the distribution side. But I think they also got to look at they're trying to get games of consequences with Adam Silver's phrase. That's why he did this in-season tournament thing. It's been a decent success. The second year not as good as the first. But, they've got an issue where basically until Christmas, people don't really care. They're still watching all the fall sports. The games don't really matter when an 82-game season, and they're not going to chop games off the schedule because that's fewer tickets and less ad sales. So they got to figure out a way to make people tune in October and November.
And, Ira, this year obviously being the first with the NFL Christmas games as well. And obviously it didn't hurt them this year, but do you think it could hurt them going forward where more people are now going to get used to watching NFL games on Christmas and they'll actually be willing to watch them on Netflix and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, Netflix did great. The NFL did great. It seems like there was enough to go around. People basically just had the TV on all day one way or another, and they know where to find what they're looking for. But I think the NFL's encroachment on the holidays in general and on Christmas Day is not a welcome development for the NBA. And they are going to be, wishing for days of the week where the NFL can't do as much. For Christmas, it really depends where Christmas falls. So that will help them a little bit. But I think they look at Christmas Day for the NBA is basically the kickoff for the casuals, right? This is when a lot of fans come in and start watching. And as for them to do this well for this first year with the NFL competing with them on Netflix, I think it's a sign that they're resilient that way, and I think they'll do even better under the new media deals.
There's another topic to talk about, and this one, I don't know what to make of this. Florida State basketballers, they're suing the coach over unpaid NIL cash, Ira.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a sign of where things are right now with NIL. It is an unregulated market, and it is a proxy for pay-to-play. And so there's no limits on it. That's the good news for players. They can basically shop themselves as free agents every season and make a lot more money than they used to. The bad news is there's a lot of broken promises, and this is an example of that. A coach basically saying, hey, stick around, don't leave, and I'll give you each $250,000, which didn't materialize. And there's a lot of that. And this is why the NCAA is trying to get control of NIL through these big settlements coming down the pipe in the House and the other class actions that are supposed to get finalized this coming year. And the trade-off there is we'll start paying you directly. We're going to have the big Power 5 schools have a bucket of $20 million to pay out to their players directly, not NIL deals coming from collectives. But in return, we want to get our hands around NIL. We want to make it fair market value. We want to have a registry, no more Wild West.
And I should add, Coach Leonard Hamilton said he was going to pay them through his business partners, and apparently it never materialized.
Right, because that's the way NIL has to work. It's this weird three-party thing. You've got the school, the player, and somebody in between, some company, some collective, some business partner, because it's not coming directly from the schools. And that is just a recipe for, all kinds of fraud and corruption.
Well, let's kind of put some context around it. 6 former FSU men's basketball players are claiming Coach Leonard Hamilton cheated them out of $1.5 million in commitment sweeteners. Here's my question. If this is really indeed the wild, wild west, Ira, what's the legal premise that these players have to get any reclamation whatsoever?
Right. I mean, it's contract law, right? You can say, where was this written down? Was it a handshake deal?
So now you're trying to
you're
trying to sue and say and prove that he actually said that, right?
Exactly.
So they have a recording,
right?
So we're at that point. It's like a TV show, Michael
and there's
Barr.
going to
be trying to find out
so
who
many
said
of these
what.
disputes.
It's I mean, this is crazy.
My word against your word.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, this is big money we're talking about here, and the government really can't do anything about it, can it, Ira?
Right. So the NCAA knows that they can't come in and say, this is how NIL has to work. They'll just lose lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. So they are trying to get a hold of it through this class action settlement. They're going to say, look, if you guys will all agree to this $2.8 billion payout and back damages and a new system where you get paid directly, then we want to be allowed to clamp down on NIL because it's just out of control. It's too much player movement, too much corruption, too much cost, and we have no way to control what happens in this marketplace. So they are going to try. I'm very curious to see how in the new year, if this gets finalized, it's supposed to happen in April, this House settlement gets finalized, whether there will just be more legal challenges, whether they're able to make it work, whether they can use a class action suit to do what professional leagues do through collective bargaining. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Is there a world where this, gets settled also in that class action lawsuit? Like, is there a world where that back pay then becomes this $250,000 each for these players, or is this just going to be completely separate? These players don't really.
No, that's the idea. Is direct to do just that. To basically say we're going to pay. There's a framework in the settlement to pay players directly it comes out to 22% of their athletic revenue essentially, and so in the coming season, if it happens, it'll be about $20.5 million that they're allowed to pay up to that amount, split it across their athletes in various sports, and most of that's going to go to men's football and basketball players. So that is the deal. They're saying, hey, sign on for this, and then we will start saying that your NIL deals have to be real NIL deals, meaning you're paid a fair market value for some kind of endorsement rather than you're paid to play here. And we call it an endorsement deal.
Ira, what if one of these players does have a smoking gun on Coach Hamilton? What if they have a recording where he did indeed promise to pay this? What next? I mean, will he have to go out of pocket? Will the school then have to pay? I mean, like, again, it's one thing to show that he was liable and that he was at fault. It's another thing entirely to figure out who's going to compensate these players for the damages, right?
Right. And I think, in most cases like this, you're not going to get that money because it never really existed, right? You might that coach might be found liable, but he probably doesn't have $1.25 million sitting around.
That's correct, and he's probably not personally liable because there's no right, so no tying him to it.
So they are they'll get something probably in that scenario, right? But it won't be the amount they were promised. Would be my guess.
Wow.
And so that's why you want to create something different, right? And I think we'll see if a class action settlement can do that. I'm skeptical myself. I think at some point they're going to have to get to employment status, and that's going to be a battle in NLRB, federal cases, maybe federal legislation. I don't know, but I don't see how you square this circle without some kind of collective bargaining.
When I was a college athlete, we had to sign letters of intent, right? And basically it said what our scholarship was. We were going to that school, blah, blah, blah. This is before everything changed. Why, can there be a world in which they do sign these contracts again and it does say what their NIL money would be from that exact school or from the collectives, or is that all just going to go away if this lawsuit?
They will still do NIL, but they will also have contracts with the schools that include money. That won't be NIL money. It'll be money for playing.
So it'll be an actual contract that they sign.
They will have a contract with the school that says we're paying you X to play. Here's $1 million.
Speaking of money. I'm sure all the other Major League Baseball owners are looking at Steve Cohen saying, thanks, man. Thanks a lot. Now, you've settled up Juan Soto, the deal, in case you haven't heard, $765 million over 15 years. This is huge money, which means at some point, are the owners on the low end going to have to pay up?
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem for baseball. It's a great deal for Soto, one of the best deals any athlete ever got. Everything in it, he gets an opt-out after 5 years, no trade clause, huge signing bonus. He gets a suite at Citi Field. He gets his own suite when they travel. He's promised his number. I mean, they said yes to everything. And Cone was willing to do this because he's super rich and he wants the Mets to win. And it's a problem for baseball because even the Yankees in the end couldn't really compete with that. And so they've already tried to restrict Cone through these luxury taxes. They added a special tier known as the Cohen tax that if you go over this threshold by a certain amount, right, you pay. It's basically the only team doing it is the Mets. They add a surcharge to the existing tax. I mean, you can be paying as much as 110% on a tax on the amount that he goes over the salary threshold. That has not been enough to stop him. And so I think what you're going to see is resurrection of the idea of a hard cap, a salary cap in Major League Baseball, which of course would be a problem for the players union. So baseball's headed for, I think, some real friction. And it's not going to be so much a war between players and owners as a war between owners.
Our thanks to Ira Budway. He covers global business for Bloomberg News. And most importantly, thank you for joining us on a special edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports. Check out our podcast and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. For my colleagues, all of them, Scarlet Fu, Damian Sassower, Jason Kelly, and Vanessa Perdomo, I'm Michael Barr. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big money in the world of sports. You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.